Hi there, this is Solitary Ronan from Solitary Ronan Films, and welcome to another episode of Global Director Challenge. Today we're in the Kingdom of Japan, probably my favourite country for cinema, and perhaps my favourite country in the world. I hope to die there at some point. This was difficult. There's just so many Japanese directors that I need to see more of. Japan is a bit like France in the sense that there's just more and more and more and more directors to watch. Obviously, because I'm sentimental, my number one is probably a bit predictable, as it seems to be with all these countries, but we'll get to that. Maybe the gap isn't quite as big as it used to be between 1 and 2, but as always, number 10 was the hardest. There's quite a lot of directors that were in the running for number 10. I think I changed it about 4 times. Again, I'll go through the omissions. Some are my fault, and some of them are obviously the director's fault for not making films that I like. But we'll go to number 10. Now, this is a director that I've maybe been critical of by saying, for me, he's never made a great film, but he's just made a lot of very good ones, and good ones, which again is in some ways harder to do. I haven't seen a film by this director that I really haven't liked, and you could argue that perhaps he's not as adventurous as some directors in the new wave, perhaps, but he did a little bit of everything, and he was working up until his death. And that's Kinji Fukasaku. Again, I was kind of surprised he ended up here, but as I said, there's quite a few that I had at number 10 that eventually got replaced by Fukasaku. Again, this is a new Battles of Honour and Humanity, but certainly an influential director in the Battles and Without Honour and Humanity, which could actually just be the title of the way the world is right now. And this is Spy number 2 from Radiance. This is Yakuza Graveyard. So yes, Fukasaku did a lot of Yakuza films, and they all kind of blend in to one big massive Yakuza film, always full of energy and the moving camera and people falling over and landing on the floor and tripping up. Not in a comedy way, just complete chaos. But that's a brilliant way of actually shooting Yakuza films, because it is mostly chaos. A lot of it is just futile and pointless. Again, that's generally what gang warfare is, and warfare in general. So again, this was a kind of a surprise that Fukasaku at number 10. Obviously he died while he was making Battle Royale 2. But Battle Royale's wonderful as well, which he made obviously later in life. Now number 9 might be controversial because I've only seen probably 4 films, but 3 out of the 4 are in the running for like some of the greatest films ever made. So that's Kenji Mizoguchi. Here's a Getsu, which I had on Criterion DVD. This is Criterion Blu-ray, and of course it's just had a Criterion 4K. Not sure I'll get it in 4K as well. This is just a wonderfully classy, beautiful, haunting ghost story, but you all know that anyway. And obviously he did Life of Uharu, but he also did in 1954 Sancho Deu, which is arguably in the running for the greatest film of all time, I think. It's just absolutely beautiful and brutal. I mean, you can't go wrong with being brutal and beautiful. So yes, you could argue he shouldn't be in the list because I haven't actually seen that many of his films. He is one of the big four, if you like, for Japanese cinema. But how many of the big four will get in the list? Yeah, I need to see more Mizoguchi. Obviously there's that legendary Eureka box set that's like 500 quid, which I won't be buying anytime soon. Number 8, again a lesser known director, but kind of wonderful. That's Kahachi Okamoto. He did Sword of Doom with Tatsuya Nakadai. He did lots of other wonderful films, including Fort Graveyard with Toshiro Mifune and Tatsuya Nakadai, about the end of the Japanese-Chinese War, which is an absolutely wonderful film where Mifune takes charge of a musical outfit. That's kind of the last soldiers they have, and he has to kind of train these guys up. It's funny, it's moving, it's brutal, and again they have to kind of try and take Fort Graveyard and hold on to it, but it is literally at the end of the war. He's also got another film called O Bomb, which is absolutely hilarious. So he always had the kind of black comedy, sometimes more obvious comedy, but kind of black comedy, brutality, and just the truth, basically. At number 7 is, again, there's 2 or 3 of these directors I've only really gotten into in the last 2 or 3 years or so. But this is a fascinating director that's done a lot of different things. And that's Masahiro Shinoda. So this is Double Suicide, which is wonderfully theatrical. Most of the sets are kind of really theatrical that you'd see on a stage. But he's done lots of different sorts of films. He did Silence. You may have heard of that because Scorsese remade it. But my favourite film of his is Assassination with Tetsuro Tamba. This is absolutely phenomenal. One of the most beautiful black and white films you'll ever see. This really needs a Blu-ray or even a 4K. This is on Eureka DVD, but it's absolutely stunning. The imagery is absolutely beautiful. It's a story of political machinations, but it's an absolute stunner from 1964. So if you haven't seen Assassination before, you should really check that out by Shinoda. And then, you know, a couple of these directors are kind of not necessarily tied to an actor, but they've certainly done a lot of work with an actor. So as my love and appreciation of Tatsuya Nakadai has grown over the years, it was only natural that I would also fall in love with Hideo Gosha, who did quite a few films with Nakadai. This is the Wonderful Bandit versus Samurai Squad, which isn't the best title in the world, with Nakadai, and it's absolutely wonderful. Nakadai is the head of a bunch of bandits and they go against samurai squad, strangely enough. Nakadai is fantastic. We go through all the introductions of everybody, and then the film really takes off. I mean, Gosha just has so many bangers, as the kids might say, but this is another banger with Nakadai. This is Cash Calls Hell, and this is actually on Vinegar Syndrome's film movements. And like Samurai Wolf has been released with Vinegar Syndrome or film movements, and Eureka and Violent Streets is on Eureka and film movements as well, which is wonderful. This is a black and white noir. It's about Nakadai who gets out of prison, and the guy he shares a cell with asks him to get rid of some men for him, and he will take the share of his money. But as he meets each of these guys, they've got their own story, and there's other forces at work as well. It's just absolutely beautiful. It's got a really jazzy score. You'll recognise some familiar faces there, especially this guy. It's just such a beautiful, tight film. It just looks wonderful on Blu-ray, and Nakadai's awesome as always. Gaioken is another one that really needs a Blu-ray. That's in snow a lot of the time. You could watch that as a double bill with A Great Silence. But Gosha's film's very visceral, violent, bleak, so you know I'm gonna love them. And at number 5, you know, this director's absolutely skyrocketed, but again, a lot of it has to do with his main female actor in quite a lot of his films, and that's Ayako Wakao, or Wakao, whichever way you want to pronounce it. So this is Irizumi. Now, Arrow released quite a few Masamura, Blind Beast, and also Red Angel, which is absolutely fabulous. There's also Giants vs Toys, Blind Beast, not with Wakao, Black Test Car, Black Test Report, but there's so many Masamura films that still need kind of proper releases. I think I've seen about 15 or 16 Masamuras, and they're just wonderful. A lot of them were written or co-written by Shindo, who again is a director that was in the running for number 10 but didn't quite get there. So they have a wonderfully kind of slightly perverse side to them. And also Masamura probably has the record for the number of films with the word wife in the title. Seisaku's wife, the wife of, I can't remember, A Wife Confesses, Two Wives, and probably quite a few other ones with the word wife in the title. But Masamura's films are quite wonderful, and also anything with Wakao in it is beyond wonderful. Number 4, again, the difference between 3 and 4 is a lot closer than it used to be. The difference between 1 and 2 is a lot closer than it used to be. But number 4, arguably one of the best directors of the last 30 odd years, probably one of the most underrated directors of the last 35-40 years, is Shinya Tsukamoto, who's a wonderful little actor as well. This is the version without the booklet of Arrow US, which has lots of his films, and they're all wonderful. Tetsuo 2, Tokyo Fist, Bullet Ballet, Kotoko Killing, A Snake of June, and my favourite, which is Vital, which Third Window recently did a Blu-ray of in the UK. Vital is, well, it's vital. And his latest film, Shadow of Fire, which Third Window also released, is another masterwork. Again, pound for pound, with the amount of money that Tsukamoto has to work with, he just does amazing work. Number 3 though It's K's all the way from now on. It's Takeshi Kitano. This is Sonatine, a film I saw in a cinema in London, that there, big London. I saw it and it just blew me away. I think I'd seen Violent Cop first, but Sonatine really blew me away. And obviously Hannah Bai. I've got a soft spot for Achilles and the Tortoise. I've just to see Neck, and that's the last one that I need to see. But Achilles and the Tortoise is probably his best film where he kind of pokes fun at himself. Obviously had a comic background, and you could say, well, quite a lot of Kitano films are a little bit samey. You know, the Outrage trilogy, you know, it's hard to tell them apart. It's just basically one big Yakuza film. But I think he's more than that. From a editing standpoint, from a compositional standpoint, from a music standpoint, I think Kitano does get sold short a little bit on what his films are and what his films are about. Because if you're just looking at Kitano as, oh, he just makes, you know, macho gangster films, I think there's a bit more to his filmography than that. If you take something like Dolls, which is just absolutely beautiful. But number two, again, this gap used to be a lot wider than it is now. And who knows if I was to do this in 5 years. It might be Swapsies at the top. But it's Kobayashi at number two. This is an absolute essential Eclipse set from Criterion. If you can get your hands on it, it's worth every penny. This is The Thick Walled Room, I Will Buy You, Black River, and Inheritance. These are DVDs, but they're really good prints. Yeah, Kobayashi, who could objectively argue that he's made the two greatest films in Japanese history, and you could argue in world history, with The Human Condition and Harakiri. Obviously, Kwai-Dan is just a feast for the eyes and ears. I've just got a couple, well, I've got 2 or 3 to actually find, but I've only got The Fossil to watch in my backlog. I've watched everything else. He does have some kind of stodgy melodramas before he kind of got into his stride in the kind of late 50s and 60s. But yeah, Kobayashi, political, and again he can hold his head up high at number two, because his films are just absolutely fantastic. So again, even if you just know The Human Condition, Kwai-Dan and Harakiri, but again, films like the ones in this set will just give you a much better view of the man, and a kind of wider palette of his films. Now, obviously, predictably, it's Kurosawa in the top. Akira Kurosawa. Again, I might be a sellout, I might be too mainstream, but I love Akira Kurosawa. Again, very much like Sergio Leone, there's certainly a sentimental aspect to this, because Kurosawa's Metallica, basically. Kurosawa is the gateway into Japanese cinema for a lot of people, the same way Metallica was the gateway into metal and heavier music for a lot of people. But now it's almost kind of fashionable to now say, oh, Kurosawa and Metallica aren't actually that good anymore. No, I mean, later work, everybody knows Metallica's later work isn't that great. But I mean, even the great stuff, it's not actually that great, and they pick holes in it, and it's like, I'm sorry, but Kurosawa is great. I don't care what anybody says. Yes, people will say, well, he's too Western, and he was influenced by Hollywood, and of course George Lucas and Spielberg and Coppola like his films because they're so Western. But I would argue it's just because they're so good. Again, from a shot composition standard, he is the standard for me. Obviously Kubrick, Leone, Orson Welles. I will give it to somebody who's not on this list as well, for shot composition, but to me Kurosawa, pause any one of his films, print it off in a huge print, put it up in art galleries, every frame of his films. He did lots of different things. Of course he has some early clunkers. I did a season of his first 10 films, and he's only really got a couple of true standouts before he kind of hit his stride. This is my favourite and kind of most underappreciated one of his great films, Stray Dog, with Mifune and Shimura, strangely enough. So many iconic films, so many iconic moments, so much influence. So yes, if you want to say, yeah, but he's too mainstream and he's too obvious, sometimes people are mainstream and obvious because their stuff's really good. So I'm not going to apologise for Kurosawa being at the top, even though nowadays it's almost like you have to apologise to be a Kurosawa fan or something, which is a little bit irritating and, to be honest, disrespectful to the man who pretty much helped us all on our journey into this wonderful world of Japanese cinema. Now, on to the omissions, and obviously I'm going to get quite a lot of abuse in the comments. Let's address it. Obviously, Ozu is not in my top 10. He was in discussion for number 10. As I said about composition, I do realise now that I'm about 22%, 24% into his catalogue. His shot composition, from a technical standpoint, Ozu is brilliant. I have no problem saying Ozu is brilliant from a technical standpoint. But so far, with the exception of Tokyo Story, Late Spring, I just think the subject matter of his films they don't strike a chord with me, and that's absolutely fine. You can't love absolutely everything. Films about old men trying to get their daughters married, they just don't strike that chord with me, unless his daughter, but certainly from a technical standpoint, I can recognise Ozu as brilliant, but I can't have somebody on my list that I don't actually kind of connect to those films as much as other people. Also, I will say he does have terrific casts. The acting in his films is brilliant. He's got star quality in his films. So again, that is not an issue. Again, if this was an objectively great 10, Ozu would be on it, but it's a favourite 10, so Ozu is not on it. Kiyoshi Kurosawa is not on it. Again, I like just about every Kiyoshi Kurosawa film I've seen, but I'm not sure I love any of them. The Ishis, Tero Ishii is a wonderful pervert. Garashi Ishii is wonderful with Punk Samurai. He was almost make the top 10. There is another couple of Ishis. Third Window are coming out with another Ishii. Katsuhiro Ishii is another wonderful Ishii. But again, not wonderful enough. Shindo, as I said before, we're talking about Masamuro. He almost made it, but didn't quite. Obviously, Seijun Suzuki, very much like Fukasaku, even though you could argue he has made a couple of great films. But again, he was in for number 10, didn't quite make it. Takashi Miike, I love a lot of his films. A lot of his films are just okay. Anybody who's actually seen every single Takashi Miike film must be in the Guinness Book of Records. Koreeda, again, I like the films that I've seen. obviously I'm a weirdo, so Erdal is still my favourite corrida, but I've got a lot of his stuff in the backlog, so it's not really fair to put him in, because I really need to, again, if I'm doing this in 5 years, if the world hasn't killed itself by then, there's a chance corrida might be on the list, because again, I've liked what I've seen so far. Yamaguchi needs a shout just for Kamikaze Girls. I should put him on the list just for Kamikaze Girls. Obviously Toyoda again was in discussion for number 10, but again, none of his films for me are 5-star films. Sion Sono, yes, I actually really liked Love Exposure. I finally really enjoyed a Sono film, even though I've only seen 3. But there was no way Sono was going to get on the list, because I just haven't seen enough, and of the ones I have seen, only Love Exposure I thought was excellent. Yoshida, again, tempted, but again, I just haven't seen enough. The same with Terajima. I've only really seen the big 3, which are all excellent. And maybe that's a bit of hypocrisy, because I put Misaguchi in just with 3 great films, so I suppose I could have squeezed Terajima in. Oshima. Now, I do have previous with Oshima. I've always held a grudge, because he was one of the new wave that was particularly outspoken about Kurosawa, the same way obviously the new wave in France was very dismissive of the old guard of filmmakers, even though some of the French new wave ended up becoming fairly mainstream themselves and making not that interesting films. But obviously Oshima, when he got older, kind of reconciled with Kurosawa, kind of understood where Kurosawa was coming from as far as struggling to get finance later on in his career, because Oshima suffered the same kind of thing. But I've always had something in for Oshima. Some of his films I really enjoy and really like. Some of the other ones I don't. But obviously that's my fault, because I'm just not smart enough. That's why I've got Kurosawa at 1, because I'm just not smart enough. Naruse, I've seen 2 Naruse so far. Woman Ascends the Stairs, which is absolutely brilliant. I did a random review of that, and that's absolutely phenomenal. And Drifting Clouds, which again was excellent. But again, I just haven't seen enough of Naruse. He's another director that I need to see a lot more of, along with Misaguchi. But hopefully by this video you can see just how many directors there are. And lots of these directors have fairly large bodies of work. And if you are insane like I am, you kind of like to try and watch as much as possible to get an idea of their whole oeuvre, which sadly sometimes it's hard to do just to get prints of the films. That's why I have some strange DVDs of some Japanese directors like Gosha and Okamoto. So I apologise if your favourite Japanese director isn't on the list, but again, this is my favourite 10. It's not an objectively great 10. So as is this competition, Fukasaku, Misaguchi, Okamoto, Shinoda and Gosha will not go through to the next round, which is tough because I do like Gosha and Shinoda a lot. But Masamura, Tsukamoto, Kitano, Kobayashi and Kurosawa, Akira go through to the next round. And again, just to reiterate, so these groups of 5s will go into the next round. I will then hold a draw to see which country will go against whatever country or region. Some of these are going to be regions. And then out of the 10, I'll take 5 from them. So you might have the 5 British directors beating the 5 French directors. It's not going to happen. But as an example, and then it would just be the 5 British ones that would go through to the next level. until I get a top 20. I can say that's my favourite 20 by scientific means. But I digress. We've got a lot to go through before we get to the second stage. So thanks so much for watching. Please don't abuse me too much in the comments for having Kurosawa number 1. Please let me know your favourite 10 or 5 or 16 or 3 Japanese directors. It is pretty tough. Japan doesn't fool around when it goes to directing films. And hopefully you'll join me again for the next episode. And I'm going to stay out east and I'm going to do my top 10 Korean directors. So you can get your thinking caps on, switch it to Korean and have a good think. So this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films saying thanks very much for watching the series so far. Hopefully you enjoyed Japan. And if any of these directors have piqued your interest, then go check them out because Japan's brilliant. Yeah, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films saying farewell.